Hello, welcome to the third episode of the Financial Incline. I'm your host, John Bovard. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Allison. Alex is the founder and CEO of the pioneering hospitality brand, D. Alexander, and the founder and managing partner of D. Alexander Capital. Together, this is a vertically integrated real estate investment platform that owns and manages homes in destination-oriented locations, operated with a tech-enabled experience and radical consistency from home to home. Recognized for visionary brand building, Alex got his start in real estate in 2008 as the founding team member of Dotloop, where he led the company's marketing, brand, and growth efforts from inception to acquisition by Zillow Group in 2015. In his free time, Alex is a distance runner and enjoys mentoring young startup entrepreneurs. In this episode today, we will cover the journey of a startup, parallels between sports and entrepreneurship, scaling and acquisition of Dotloop, and how his new company, D. Alexander, is changing the real estate market. I hope you enjoy. Alex, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Appreciate you tuning in from Denver out there. I got a quick little tour of your office, and it looks great. Love the backdrop, and obviously you're doing some big things out there.
Yeah, we're enjoying it. There are plenty of whiteboards and ping pong tables.
Of course, that's a staple. So, but yeah, Alex. So, if you wouldn't mind taking us back and just sharing a little bit of your background. I know that, so we both know each other. You know, there's kind of a sports connection through my college roommate, Danny McKee, and us playing sports together, and know you were a college athlete. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of taking us back to, growing up and, kind of the role that sports played in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great question. My father was a builder, small business owner in builder. My mother was also in IT. So my father built his first home when he was in his early 20s. And I mention that because there's a real estate tie there. But as long as I've can remember, I've been in and around real estate in some way, shape, or form. As early as I could carry a hammer in my hand, I had a hammer in my hand. So there's this love and affection that dates back to childhood with real estate. But in parallel, I recall spending many late nights at my mom's office growing up as she was juggling the early stages of startup life, in which she was a part of an early stage company. Actually, she's still there today. That company went through a liquidity event and sold to another company. So it's been 5 years. And so I fell in love with real estate as a way to live, and kind of what the place that it had in the world and the place that it had in people's lives. And I played soccer competitively growing up, and I went to university to play soccer. But along that journey, I also knew that I wanted to start a business. So I studied entrepreneurship, and in my second year of university or undergrad, I got my real estate license, bought my first home when I was 19, got my license. Simultaneously, my brother was a practicing real estate agent, and that's how he paid his way through undergrad as well as law school. And he had a concept to bring the real estate transaction online. He shared that concept with me, and I said, sign me up. Yep. And from that point forward, I led all things kind of growth, go-to market strategy, brand. And so a collection of events over the course of both personal life as well as professional life that has been centered around real estate is really what brought me to where I am today, as well as that's been my journey.
Yeah. Sounds like you got an early start at entrepreneurship and working, and that's fantastic. I didn't know that about your real estate license in college, so that was some great foresight there. Absolutely. So, if you were to take a couple of lessons that playing sports in college and how you were able to translate that into your career. What were some of the key takeaways from the lessons you learned of playing on those competitive teams at a high level?
Yeah, there are a lot of parallels with sports. When I look back and, and try to identify what I love about sports, it's more so just the game, the competitiveness. It's being on a team and going out on the field and knowing that you can control a certain outcome.
Mm-hmm.
How you go about getting that or driving that outcome can happen in a lot of different ways, and it often includes multiple people being aligned and sharing in that strategy and direction. That's why I love sports. Everyone used to always say, "Hey, do you love soccer?" And it's like, well, it's really not about soccer. It's about just competing and putting it in the field and thinking through strategy and working with other people and identifying how to win and increasing the probability of that outcome of winning along the way. So that directly correlates in early stage business in particular. Certainly, if you're starting something from the ground up, and it takes this unwavering conviction in order to drive a great outcome. So a lot like sports, you're not going to win in sports if every single play that you're making doesn't have this underlying element of unwavering conviction. That is more true in business and in early stage business as well than ever before, actually.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Great lessons to be learned there. And what I find unique about your story is right after your college graduation, you jumped right into the startup world. So there wasn't a period of, hey, going to work for corporate America. Like you mentioned, you and your brother, as soon as you graduated, you started getting after it. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those stories of, kind of the early days of Dotloop and, some of the struggles, some of the uncertainties, and even some of the difficult times that you encountered at the beginning.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers on that one. I would say any successful company right, has a long list of interesting stories and dynamics, and I really think about it as this series of challenges which map back to an element of progress. And if you figure out how to take those challenges and turn them into opportunities every step of the way, good things follow. For us, we started the company in early 2019. Started working on it in late 2018, 2009. And we started working on the company in late 2008. Around that time, like, you just had the real estate market crash. That's a very interesting time to enter any sector when a sector changes, when it goes through a life cycle and you're coming into that sector. It's very interesting dynamic. So that's one element, is just market conditions. The second is we were taking a traditional kind of old school process that relied on historic norms coupled with paper, and so it's making that shift happen is very challenging. It requires an element of the right product, the right people, the right process, market timing, strategy. So there's a number of examples. I would say one really interesting example was when we officially launched the company nationally. At the time, a company that we felt like was our closest competition happened to, on the day that we launched the company, that other company launched a partnership that made their product available to every realtor in the country. And that partnership was with the National Association of Realtors. So you can imagine your day of launching, your debut, the company that you consider as your biggest competition partners with the largest trade association in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty interesting feeling.
Right.
And so combination of other activities, I think as you scale, there's always challenges, and they generally fit the same profile.
Right.
Degree of complexity shifts over time.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's that had to be a nerve-wracking event, I'm sure. And if you were to look at it from, a personal finance perspective, where I'm sure a lot of your income and what you're using to live off of is probably getting poured back into the company. So things like budgeting, or early on buying nice things or nice cars. I'm sure there's obviously that sense of delayed gratification. So when you're bootstrapping a company, how do you go about with some of those day-to-day expenses or thoughts around saving and budgeting your money?
Yeah, I would start by knowing what outcome you want to drive and over what duration of time. We just as people and human beings, we often don't look at the duration or the horizon at which we want to achieve something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to put it in that perspective. I generally think on 10-year time horizons for a lot of different reasons. So that's one, is knowing the horizon and what you want out of the equation, and backing into how you can best influence that outcome,
Mm-hmm.
being aligned to being aligned with that outcome, and yeah, how it aligns with your interests. So in other words, know the duration, know what you want out of it, align those elements with what makes you unique. What's your superpower, what excites you, why do you get up out of bed every day, and ultimately what are you chasing? And interestingly enough, that event that I referenced, the other company launching on the day that we launched, or securing a partnership on the day that we launched, it was actually one of the most freeing experiences that I can recall. And the reason was we had a great deal of clarity around who we were and the path that we wanted to take. It was like rocket fuel, in our engines. It motivated us. So it was having that degree of clarity and understanding our point of differentiation and the diversification that lives within everything that we do, whether it's business, investing, life. Life by default is uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out how to navigate those waters is one of the most exciting elements of life. But I
Right.
also think that it backs into investing as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as far as the people, listening to this call or watching this on YouTube or the podcast, and they might be contemplating starting their own business, leaving corporate America and going out on their own and taking a big risk. That's something that you have obviously done and continue to do through your career. So if you had any pearls of wisdom or any advice to somebody that was on the fence, maybe they have an idea, they're not sure if it'll work, or there's something holding them back, what would you say to that person, as far as if they should move forward with it or if they should not, or what are some steps that they could take?
Yeah, gaining clarity on what you want and why, and commit to it. Like, just hard commitment. I think in order to make change of any sort, it requires a discipline, a different degree of discipline around committing to an outcome. And really, once you commit, that follows by execution.
Mm-hmm.
That's one item. The second is and I think this is situational, but in general, doing it with people that have a shared interest or a sense of alignment. So when I launched our company, we surrounded the company with the best category creators, visionaries, and complementary sectors. And that was because I believe that it's necessary, but also it can help accelerate success, in which if people can go further faster together.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to that. And when you have a degree of alignment and shared interest, it makes things easier.
Right.
Doing it with great people, but not just great people that are really behind and aligned what you're doing, and that
Yeah.
can come in different forms.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. I love that. I love that takeaway. And I love the willingness to commit to it. Just knowing that, come hell or high water, you're going to be getting after it. And if it means, making sacrifices in the short term, then that's what, that's what it takes, is that full commitment.
Yeah, and building on that, it's also a muscle that you always have to flex. There isn't a silver bullet to commitment, and you consistently have to flex it. Actually, I have a ton of books here in the office. You can see those behind me. Some of my favorite books. Actually, I have one right here. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Highly recommend that. But it's a muscle that you just have to keep flexing. And so long as you know that, it will bring you back to your North Star in the event that you ever waver from that degree of commitment.
Right. Right. That's great. I love that. So, and then taking us back. So obviously Dotloop, huge success. You have the exit, with the transaction with Zillow, and, once that goes through, what was that moment like for you? I mean, what was kind of going through your mind as you saw, a lot of the culmination of the work you've put in, now leading to, to that type of an event? One, what was going through your mind as that happened? And, two, how quickly did you kind of pivot to, okay, now things have changed a little bit and it's time to still get after it. It's still time to regroup and, keep working and keep getting after it. So, what was that like, when going through that exit?
Yeah, it's an odd feeling, to be honest. Most people look at, I think most people think about the exit economics, the number, the way that it happened, who it happened with. We were acquired by Zillow, a very prominent consumer brand,
Mm-hmm.
and the multiple and everything else, which is public information, is it's certainly a topic of discussion, but I think for most people, at least for me in particular, it was an odd feeling. And the reason is you have so much of your identity and who you are wrapped up into what you just spent 6 years building, and or call it your first stage of your journey in career mode.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just an exit. It is it's almost this shift in identity, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. In which it's your baby. It's like your baby, and any small business owner, any athlete, any creator, honestly, anyone that has whether it's art or poetry or you're creating something that is a byproduct of your passions, your interests. So that in itself is a very interesting feeling. And then looking at what's next,
Right.
in which it's hard to take yourself away from being so passionate about something and wanting to stay with it.
Yeah.
Simultaneously knowing that something just slightly changed.
Right.
for me, I stayed with the company for 4 years thereafter, and I thought highly of Zillow, and still to this day, I couldn't be more bullish on them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to experience being a part of a growth-oriented later stage company, but a company that had the mindset and operating style as an early stage company.
Mm-hmm.
After that acquisition, I shifted my focus into ancillary and new channels of business. And one reason why that aligned with me well was, as well as developing our integration ecosystem, essentially how we work across the industry, that worked really well with my passion, my interest, as a function of, it almost has this startup style of framework within a broader, bigger company.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for opportunities to solve problems in a marketplace and trying to build product around it and grow adoption. So that was exciting to me. And I started traveling around the country. Zillow had a really interesting company benefits and policies at that time. And I started traveling around the country and working remote in destination-oriented locations. And this was 2015 at the time, late 2015. I would spend 1 month at a time, 2 months at a time in different spots. That's what led to where I'm at today.
Yeah. And that's perfect. I appreciate you walking us through that, and very excited to dive into where you're at today with D. Alexander. So I know you guys are changing the way kind of that destination or that vacation or that real estate, really kind of changing an entire industry with how that all works. So for people that aren't familiar with D. Alexander, can you just kind of walk us through who you guys are and kind of what your mission is?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on where we left off previously, in which, when I was traveling around the country working remotely, I was also really well connected to the single family short-term rental / investor space, and I was working alongside a couple different companies, more just from an advisory capacity standpoint, and it provided a series of events provided a great deal of just visibility into the chain of events, or what I would refer to as evolution and living, that were occurring. People were starting to think about someone else's home, called an Airbnb, like a hotel, yet they weren't getting hotel-like value, meaning standards and expectations. Simultaneously, it was becoming easier to own and operate homes, or called assets, from afar.
Mm-hmm.
It also becoming easier to understand the economics of an asset, and how to use it in different ways to cater to a specific audience or to drive a specific outcome. However, the marketplace was looking at various pieces of it, in which I took more of a broad view approach around where I thought the world was going to be 10 years from that time. And I felt like a shift in living was going to occur, in which people were going to live in migration type of ways, which required flexibility, optionality, certainty. But in parallel, it also required a different degree of financial discipline around real estate. Historically, everyone focused on real estate as just the hard asset side of the equation, but there are underlying economic values that apply, in so long as you use them right. So I saw this series of events happening across just social and economic landscapes and behavioral landscapes, and I believed that people were going to own homes in different ways, and that individuals would want a consistent look and feel from home to home, or called a degree of standards. So that's what D. Alexander specializes in. We are changing the way that people own homes and invest in homes, and we do that today through a real estate fund, vertically integrated real estate fund. However, that will evolve over time. And for consumers, we are providing consistency, uh,
Mhm.
consistency from home to home, and we're delivering value that's that value that's tied to the underlying hospitality offering for those end consumers. So a hospitality brand with a unique dynamic real estate ownership and investment model wrapped in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it's great. I mean, the just from reading your articles, checking out your website, and familiarizing myself with your company, it's very forward thinking. Your view on real estate and home ownership, it's to me, it looking at what has happened this past year with people can work from anywhere. People's homes are now their gym, their office. It's where they raise a family. It's all kind of different things, but with the conventional office real estate, maybe in jeopardy. Maybe there'll be some companies that never come back to it. It's to me, it's wild that you've almost obviously you had the foresight, couldn't have predicted what happened with COVID in the way that real estate has shifted, but now seem to be positioned perfectly for what could happen over the next 5 to 10 years. So with that in mind, I mean, what do you see happening as far as, like you refer to it as that destination living, or kind of that short term, what people viewed as vacations, maybe now, maybe they're longer term than that. Maybe vacation's not the right word if they're staying at somewhere for 2 or 3 months at a time. So do you see that trend, continuing or being sped up, or what's kind of your view on that?
Yeah, I look at it as a underlying shift in the future of living. The one thing that kept people in the location that they were at, or call it owning real estate, and in the way that they do today, is really tied to a few different factors. A big one is work. It's
Yep.
can you work from anywhere? And once you cut that cord, you're free to go work from wherever, but also in locations that accelerate your work, whether that's being inspired on the beach and being in an environment that unlocks some potential within you, or being in the Hollywood of the world, if you're creating movies, if you're a cinematographer. It gives you the freedom and optionality to go chase what you want to chase in ways that you couldn't before. So I look at it as a fundamental shift, which has hard intrinsic economic values around it.
Mhm.
I think for individuals that are listening or pondering what's going on in real estate, one anecdote I would just add is, you don't need to be an expert. You shouldn't be. There's too many layers that add up to economic outputs. I think the important piece is that you have someone like Incline. You just touched on a number of different layers relative to real estate that most people wouldn't. So long as you have someone around you that's thinking about these shifts, that's the most important piece. Uh,
Mhm.
but I think being open to change is very important. Change often requires a blueprint, and it requires a blueprint because there's a series of events that have to occur until that evolution, or call it actual change, happens. But it happened overnight.
Right.
So we don't have a blueprint for living relative to this change. So the best thing that we can do, in my opinion, from a humanity and socioeconomic standpoint, is embrace it, roll with it. And we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to go chase whatever we want to chase.
Right.
Uh, that's an exciting time, and real estate is certainly at the center of that.
Yes, it is. And it's definitely, in all areas, it is a very hot market right now for real estate, regardless of where you are. And real estate's a good investment right now with inflation going up. That helps real estate to hold its value. And then the other good thing about owning real estate, when you have a loan on a property, that loan majority of the time is fixed. So that interest rate stays the same, whereas the value and the appreciation of the asset can continue to grow and keep up with inflation. So yeah, I believe strongly that real estate's a good place to be right now if you are, looking for places to invest your capital.
Yeah, just inflation alone. Often people think about the underlying equity value, and there's a lot to unpack on equity value. But how do you benchmark real estate, or call it a position within your broader portfolio, against the other factors at play?
Right.
From that standpoint, you can almost take this idea of a house out of the equation and just say, I have hard equity assets, and how do I compare and contrast that against these other big economic drivers without even changing the real estate? So it's very, very interesting to think about through that perspective. The second piece is like, what does real estate really mean, or how do you separate different categories of real estate? Often people think of a home as a home, and as an example, I would say one of the hardest aspects of starting our business was financing on the underlying properties. And the reason was that the traditional marketplace, or traditional financiers, looked at homes that were operated as short-term rentals as being higher risk because they didn't have a long-term master lease. So they the short-term or long-term rentals as a lower risk profile. I looked at it differently and said, one, you have this higher yield potential on homes that are operated in certain ways. There's also this tax side to the equation, but you have more diverse ways to use that asset. You can consume it by living in it. You can rent it short-term, long-term, mid-term for events. Like, there's having that optionality and flexibility inherently provides diversification.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this clear diversification element that when tying real estate to something else, it unlocks the ability to see it through a different lens. And I think that's very interesting from a value creation perspective, as well as wealth creation or wealth preservation perspective within a portfolio. And that's why today we focus on a collection of homes and targeted areas. It's because diversification, as opposed to individual homes, individual assets.
Right. Yeah, that is that's an interesting way to think about it. Definitely is those different aspects of, like you said, ways that you can consume the real estate. So if you wouldn't mind taking us back to, so, for a lot of people, and, I'm sure you probably had moments like this where you've got the idea in your head, right? You've got the idea for D. Alexander, and, it sounds great. And people, a lot of times, they've got great ideas in their mind, but taking that from idea, then executing on it, to then launching. So what was kind of your strategy and your process for that? And that could be either, including partners, or, if you've got mentors or people that help you from an entrepreneurial standpoint. But how did you get this idea off the ground and get it to where it's at today?
Yeah. Understanding the problem I was trying to solve and the drivers behind it was a big one for me. I think there's a couple different ways to tackle it. You can tackle it just through blind faith and taking that leap, or you can tackle it through smart analysis coupled with a degree of risk. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of parallels here with both sports. There's a lot of parallels with investing, and when you look at risk, we think about risk as the highest priority, but risk is relative to something else, right? If you're chancing X because you want Y out of it, what are the Z and the variables in between, and what's the likelihood of something happening to those variables. So for me, it's partially analytical, but as well as this underlying confidence / experience, while having other people that complement my voids.
Mhm.
It's putting those pieces together and then taking the next step. Taking the next step is the hardest. It's saying, I'm going to do this, and actually leaving your job
Right.
and shifting your lifestyle and rolling into a future that might not have a clear path. It's taking that step that can be scary, especially if you have, for a lot of people, especially if you have kids and a family and high overhead.
Right.
So one element that I'm always big on is keeping your just recurring overhead, your personal living overhead low, and doubling down on the assets that work for you, that are going to work for you, meaning like real estate, things that create value and add value and preserve value, and then keeping your lifestyle and operating overhead as low as possible, because when you do that, you're maximizing your value, but you also have less baggage or more tailwind to go chase something else. So
Yeah.
people on the table taking
Right.
this.
Right. I love that. And so to wrap up here, I mean, obviously, this is a podcast about, finances and money. And one of the things that I like to ask all guests is do you have, obviously there in the past, people save for retirement, and some people say they have a certain number in mind of, once you have that amount of money saved, then you'll feel financially free, or you'll feel comfortable to retire. Or for other people, maybe it's a goal of growing the business to a certain revenue. So is there any sort of goal or milestone, whether that be, personally for you or for your business, that you're looking to hit or achieve, to where you'll feel like you're financially free or financially set for the future?
Yeah, I look at finances, or call it in my personal life, as more of a measurement of how that's going to enable me to help others in the future. As well as in business, I look at the financials as it's a measurement of performance, the same way an athlete looks at the scoreboard, and those are numbers that back into a formula. So for me, it's a measurement of how well you're playing, how well you're performing, and how well that maps back to what you want at the end of the day. If you want a nice car, you're going to have to plan for that. If you want a nice car today, if you're okay with having a nice car 10 years from now or 20 years from now, that has to get baked into the strategy. So really understanding the sacrifices that you're willing to take, coupled with how you get there and how long it's going to take to get there, have been big for me. I worked for 6 years without really any income, at least income relative to what I was putting in, for sure. And it's because I had a high degree of confidence that those 6 years of not taking that income were going to 10x the collection of that income over the course of 6 years. So it's having great individuals like yourself around the table, and also having a plan. And that plan doesn't need to be some big spreadsheet. That's why you have partners that can help prepare the numbers for you. Just a simple bulleted list that says, 10 years from now, I want to be here. 5 years from now, I want to be here. And with an underlying formula of what do you need in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Alex, I appreciate the time. And for people that want to reach out or connect with you, what's what's the best place to find you or find information about your company?
Yes, staydalexander.com is the best place to see our consumer-facing hospitality brand. Personally, email alex@staydalexander.com. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, as well as the company. And then dalexandercapital.com is our the asset side to what we do.
Well, great. Well, keep it up, Alex. Keep up the hard work, and I appreciate the time today.
Thanks for having me.